to exist, like you just mentioned, bringing like the Fantastic Four, mutants in? Is this a show that's going to exist in any sort of like shared universe space that we've seen, with any other Marvel shows? Or?
I hope so.
Okay.
I think it was really important for the first season to really establish Tandy and Tyrone, even as people before they become superheroes, for lack of a better word. But I'm a big fan of what Josh and Stephanie did on The Runaways, and we're always talking about when do we get to do our crossover.
Awesome.
There's probably 400 lawyers in the way.
Sure.
But I still have like some fun family that worked on Daredevil, and I think there's so much fun being had. I'm excited for however Cloak and Dagger can play in the universe.
Sure.
Are there any plans to put Aubrey and Olivia in, or at least a version of the signature Cloak and Dagger uniforms, costumes?
You're going to be so excited to see how things are evolved. But we're also not going to be sexist.
Sure.
So you might never see your navel.
Yeah.
Weird question. Well, maybe not weird question. I was wondering who made the decision to make it so that they couldn't, physically touch.
I think it probably came from me at some point, and I think the idea was to make their life difficult, and I think the way we.
Not difficult enough.
Well, these are Marvel superheroes, right? Like, Peter Parker was married to a supermodel, and yet his life was impossible. But I think what we wanted to do was, we say it, I think, in the teaser, the world keeps pulling us together, the world keeps pushing us apart. This is a story, first and foremost, about finding your best friend, and I love the idea of, like, someone who you couldn't touch, who you couldn't manipulate, so you had to be honest with them. And so, I grew up a big fan of Buffy and things like that, and behind Buffy is the idea of nobody understands me, and I think Cloak and Dagger is the story of exactly one person understands me.
TV shows, I want to know what was about Cloak and Dagger that really made you say, we want to do a show about these guys?
Well, every show that we look at, we start from a place of, what can we say that's different from our other shows? What made Cloak and Dagger unique in the 1980s was that it was first a show about teenagers. It was a story about teenagers. And secondly, that it was a story about race. And in many ways, at the time, it was not just what it was about. And when we started looking at what's happening around us now, what really became important to us was how important kids, teenagers, young adults are, particularly through social media, affecting the world around us. And whether it is that they're marching on Washington to talk about the horrors of what went on in Parkland, or whether it is that they're just trying to communicate with each other about what's happening to the world. And the having the strength and the passion to be able to say, yeah, that's fine, but we have to live here after you're gone. And when we looked at that, we said, that's a voice that we need to have. And happens to be a voice that Freeform really likes projecting out to not only their audience, but to the world. And so it became a sort of a good idea. I think is we had a network that was looking for young heroes. We had two young heroes that we were interested in telling a story about. We had a showrunner in Joe Pokaski, in that was passionate about who they were as Ty and Tandy, and not so much as Cloak and Dagger, meaning every show that we start with, we always want to start with who's the person, what's happening to them. And in particular, what we love about the show is it's hard enough trying to figure out how to be a kid. Now, let's add that little Marvel sauce of, oh, by the way, you have powers. And so it's not a show, that's what people ask us all the time, which is, do you think that there are too many superhero shows? And I go, I don't know, we don't make superhero shows. We make shows about people who, yes, they have powers, and yes, they are Marvel, but if it doesn't work on the very basic level of you love Ty and you love Tandy, and when you've got Olivia Holt and you've got Aubrey Joseph playing those parts, they're doing more than half the work. The other half is great writing that's coming from Joe Pokaski, and in the case of the first episode, Gina doing the directing, and there's a story that I love to tell, which is when Gina came in and first talked to us, we said, what is it about the script that attracted you to it? And she said, I have 2 young boys at home, and they have said to me, why is it that there are no heroes of color that we can look at and say, that's who we want to be? And it's fine that we have Luke Cage, that's awesome. It's fine that there's an incredibly diverse group that's at S.H.I.E.L.D. or an incredibly diverse group that's at Runaways. They hadn't seen Runaways at that time. But the idea of being able to create Ty and Tandy so that young women and young men can look at someone who is their own age and perhaps that color, or perhaps have a friend that's that way, so that they can look at it and go, wow, this story feels like me. And that's a unique opportunity, and that's what always we're looking to do.
Knows the comments. It's just like, how do you take that into account? How do you make it your own?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly exciting. It's where I wanted to go. I love all these films. I love the shows, and so when I got the call, when they said it's a Marvel show, and I was like, okay, like didn't even know what it was yet. And then they explained, and then I got even more excited because, I mean, I love the fact that these are 2 teenagers and 2 damaged teenagers that find each other, and I love telling those kind of stories. The fact that it was a black boy and a young white girl is great to put those 2 characters as superheroes up on screen, which is still pretty rare. And then to be able to bring my aesthetic to it and really create a real grounded, authentic show within this fantastical universe. And the fact that Marvel was excited about that and didn't shy away from that. And that we got to deal with the deep themes that we're dealing with the show, but also that there's a love story element within it as well. It was like everything I wanted, and then to find those 2 actors who are so good and have such great chemistry, I just had fun.
So their relationship to each other is so important to have the whole. So how do you both approach that as actors?
I think me and Olivia just kind of saw from the jump the chemistry that we had, and it was easy for me. You know, it's easy to work with Liv. It's like, you know, she. Come on, don't make me cry. Nah, it's you know, she's, you know, silly Liv, you know, on set, but she can go straight into, you know, being the invested and being in the scene, and that was so easy for me because it's just like all I have to do is come in and bring it at the same level that, you know, my companion is bringing it. So and just for it being my first, you know, lead role anyway, it's I'm glad I got to do it with someone like Liv. So she, you know, showed me the ropes and
butter me up over here.
Come on.
I feel the same way. I mean, you know, it's so important for 2 actors who are going to be working together, obviously a lot, to feel just as passionate about, you know, the show, the project, the characters as much as you do. So I think, you know, I obviously feel very special. And Tandy and Tyrone have a very complicated relationship. I mean, their relationship is an emotional roller coaster. They love each other one day, they hate each other the next. They're friends one day, they're enemies the next. So I think it's a lot that they go through, and I think it's a really beautiful way of telling it. I mean, their story arc is something special, and I don't think I've ever seen anything like their story before. And obviously, introducing an interracial duo couple to TV is really important for us as well. And to tell their story is something that we feel very grateful to be a part of. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
It wasn't planned.